This daily dose is brought to you by Pirate.Black. ARRR!
We've just been forced to use digital stuff more and more and more.
And one thing the government has done, and nobody's talking about this, but I think that this is absolutely major. They've got rid of cash. Can you explain why that is such a disastrous thing for our society? Especially for me, because I don't want to pay tax, but that's beside the point.
People are not talking about that enough. But cash is very important because it's the only way in which citizens can buy things without being tracked. And if we don't have a society in which we are interacting with each other, we're just interacting through online. We're all using credit cards, we're all using PayPal, and that gets tracked really easily. And so there's no way to buy things or services in a way that hasn't been tracked. And you can say, well, but that's great because that fights crime, right? And yes, it fights crime. It can be helpful to fight crime, but it also does away with certain kinds of privacy that are really important. So here are a few examples. Paying a lawyer. That's very kind of revealing about what you're interested in or what you might be worried about. Paying for a psychiatrist or a psychologist or other kinds of support. Buying books. So books are very revealing, again, of what you're interested in and what you're worried about. And a lot of people, I think, are very complacent because they think, well, we live in a democracy. Our government is not out to get me, for what I read. And fair enough. But right now, the Taliban have gotten a hold of US biometric systems. And the point is that we are creating an architecture of surveillance that is so good that if it gets taken over by a bad government, we are in serious trouble because it will be impossible to resist. And even if, I think it's very complacent to think that our government will always be benevolent and democratic, because the best predictor that something will happen in the future is if it's happened in the past. And it's happened in the past that we don't have the best government possible. But even if you thought, okay, no, this country is amazing and it's always going to have the right government, can you be sure that in 10 years' time, we're not going to be invaded by another government, by China, by Russia, I don't know, by somebody else? I think that you have to be really confident in your soothsaying abilities to not be scared about having this architecture of surveillance.
People aren't getting angry about this because a lot of the time they don't really understand it. They don't understand that it's happening to them, first of all, and they don't understand the long-term implications of this data harvest.
Yeah, that is true, and that's a challenge we have. On the upside, more and more people, downside, more and more people are having bad experiences online. So in a survey I did with a colleague, Shian Brook, we found out that about 92% of people have had some kind of bad experience related to privacy online. Sometimes it's about getting your credit card number stolen. Sometimes it's about being exposed on Twitter. Sometimes it's about, having an ex-boyfriend track you or something like that. And the more we have bad experiences, the more we learn that actually privacy was important after all. And the more we get angry that these companies are making us vulnerable. But you're right that we need a lot more consciousness. And in particular, we need to be much more aware of the political implications of privacy. This is not an individual thing, or it is an individual thing, but it's much more than that.
And do you think, for instance, when you look at something like China, that is a warning for us all, particularly in this country?
It's such a huge warning, and it's such an interesting case for so many reasons. But one reason is that they claim that they are more ethical than we are because we're doing the same thing. We're scoring people, but we're just not telling them. And there's actually some truth to that. Of course, the flip side is that we have a lot more freedom. And even if you're being scored, say, as a consumer, that's not going to impact whether you get, a place at a university or a job. So we're much more compartmentalized. And that's part of what makes a liberal society liberal instead of being a totalitarian regime. We have to make sure that we don't walk into that system. We have to walk away from it. And I am very worried that we're walking towards it. But now a really interesting lesson from China is coming through right now as we speak. And that's that one argument from the West for not regulating data was that, we have to have as much data as possible because look at China, they're collecting so much data. And if we don't collect enough data, we will be at a disadvantage. And now it turns out that China is passing one of the strictest privacy laws in the world right now. And that's very interesting. There's a lot of speculation about why exactly are they doing it. They're hurting their stock. So why exactly are they doing it? One reason I think, it may not be the only reason, but one really important reason is that they are realizing how dangerous it is to have so much personal data stored, because it's a national security danger and the West is going to hack it sooner or later and make a use of it. So if even China is regulating privacy, like, we really have to get our act together quickly.
As individuals, what can we do to protect ourselves?
There's a lot we can do because these companies depend on us and our data. So choose privacy-friendly apps and devices. Don't ever buy a device from a company like Google that earns their keep through collecting personal data. Instead of using WhatsApp, use Signal. Instead of using Google search, use DuckDuckGo. Instead of using Gmail, use something like ProtonMail. Instead of using Dropbox, use Jota Cloud, or there are many alternatives out there. Protect other people's privacy. Contact your political representatives and tell them that you care about this. And in general, let's kind of create a culture of privacy and not a culture of exposure.
And don't use that facial recognition software. Isn't that one that you should absolutely avoid with the apps?
Yeah, if you can, definitely avoid biometrics whenever possible.
Follow the treasure to pirate.black, because financial privacy today is freedom tomorrow. ARRR!